Hello, and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, April 16th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, and Tamara Nassar. Asa Winstanley is away this week. It's day 923 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we speak to Sara Larijani and Taha Zeinali, scholars at the University of Tehran, to talk about the situation on the ground in Iran as a 2-week ceasefire with the U.S. is set to expire. Later on in the program, Jon will cover the latest on the situation in the Strait of Hormuz and Hizballah's fierce resistance to the Israeli military's invasion of South Lebanon. And just a quick note, we won't have a show next week, April 23rd, but of course, all of our coverage will continue on electronicintifada.net, and we'll be back on Thursday, April 30th. Let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine and Lebanon. In Gaza, 8 Palestinians were killed and nearly 30 were wounded in Israeli attacks over a 24-hour period between Tuesday and Wednesday, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. On Tuesday night, at least 5 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli strike on the beach refugee camp in Gaza City. The Electronic Intifada's contributor, photojournalist Mohammed Assad, posted this report to his social media from the funeral march in the beach camp on Wednesday.
Really a ceasefire agreement in Gaza?
There is a false image among the people around the world that ceasefire is in place in Gaza, but in reality what's happening only reduction of the intensity of the violence. Instead of killing 100 of 200 Palestinians in the day, Israeli forces are now killing between 5 and 10 Palestinians daily. The heartbreaking scenes and continuous funerals are happening every day. Children are being killed, women are being killed, and young are being killed. Mothers crying over their children and loved ones, and not an exception. It is a daily reality. This is also happening amid rising tensions in the Middle East, particularly related to the Iran front. As the global attention shifts to other regions, Israeli forces are taking advantage of this and continue to carry out these violations on a daily basis.
That was Mohammed Assad in Gaza. Just hours before Tuesday's attack on the beach refugee camp, Israel carried out a strike on a vehicle in Gaza City, killing a police officer and 3 bystanders, one of whom was a 3-year-old boy, Yahya al-Malahi. Reporter Saad Hizballah captured footage of Yahya's father, Mukhlis al-Malahi, in agonizing shock and grief, cradling the body of his toddler whose head is split in half, with blood all over both of their clothes. He told reporters that they were leaving a relative's wedding when an Israeli plane attacked the police car. The boy's cousin told Reuters, quote, "What is his fault? What is his crime? He should be wearing a wedding suit at his cousin's today, but instead he wore a shroud stained with blood." Israeli fire also killed a 14-year-old child, Ahmed Halawa, near Jabalia in the north, according to health ministry officials. On Monday, April 13th, Israeli forces bombed a cafe in Gaza City, targeting Palestinians who were sitting inside. Reporter Mahmoud Shalha covered the scene as people pulled bodies from the rubble by hand. In northern Gaza, 10-year-old Abdullah Dawas was shot in the head and killed by an Israeli quadcopter drone on April 11th, according to reporter Maha Husseini. Husseini said that at least 8 Palestinians had been killed in a series of Israeli attacks across Gaza on Sunday. On April 10th, at least 6 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli airstrike on the Burej refugee camp in central Gaza. The Gaza government media office stated on Tuesday that in the 6 months since the so-called ceasefire was declared, Israel has killed more than 750 Palestinians, injured 2,100, and committed approximately 2,400 violations. Of those violations, Israel has committed more than 1,100 incidents of shelling and targeted strikes, hundreds of incidents involving the demolition of homes and other buildings, and nearly 100 incursions into residential neighborhoods and areas. Meanwhile, Israel continues to use food, medicine, medical supplies, and fuel as weapons, with its draconian blockade of humanitarian aid firmly in place. The Gaza government media office affirmed this week that Gaza is, quote, being subjected to a systematic, deliberate, and escalating process of engineered starvation perpetrated by the Israeli occupation. This is being executed through the complete control of the flow of basic commodities, foremost among them flour and bread, thereby posing a direct threat to the food security of the people in the Gaza Strip. Gaza requires around 450 tons of flour per day, the office stated, but only about 200 tons are currently available, quote, creating a severe daily deficit. Despite the ceasefire agreement, which requires 600 aid trucks per day, only around 200 have been allowed in on average, leaving shelter supplies, medical aid, and food items almost non-existent, reports Maha Husseini in Middle East Eye. This comes on the heels of a claim made by Nikolai Mladenov, envoy to Donald Trump's Board of Peace, that 602 trucks entered Gaza on April 9th, quote, with essential supplies for families who have waited too long. Mladenov's statement, the Gaza media office said, quote, lacks accuracy and credibility, and it contradicts documented facts on the ground. Actual data for April 9th, 2026 confirms the entry of only 207 trucks, 79 of which were aid trucks. This falls far short of the required level of humanitarian response and in no way reflects expanded access, as was alleged, particularly given that the rate of compliance with truck entry protocols since the commencement of the ceasefire has not exceeded 38% of the agreed-upon target. The media office noted that Mladenov's deliberate misinformation, quote, raises fundamental questions. Where is the so-called Board of Peace amidst the Israeli occupation's daily violations of the agreement? Why does it remain silent? And furthermore, where does it stand regarding the public pledges it made before the international community to protect the Gaza Strip in light of a catastrophic and worsening humanitarian reality? Medical Aid for Palestinians, a British charity, this week warned of the ongoing shortages of basic medications and medical supplies across Gaza. More than 53% of essential medicines are at zero stock, medical workers say, including 64% of cancer medications. Around 70% of medical laboratories have stopped functioning because of the lack of supplies, and 90 hospital generators are out of service due to spare parts and oil being blocked by Israel. Medical Aid for Palestinians says that approximately half of all hospitals remain non-functional, and there are still no fully functional hospitals in Gaza at all. MAP says that their teams, quote, can't find even the essential medicines they need. That says everything about how aid is coming in. Euromed Human Rights Monitor released a comprehensive report this week on Israel's de facto state policy of sexual violence against Palestinians in Israeli prisons and detention centers. The report, titled Another Genocide Behind Walls, documents widespread patterns of sexual violence, including rape, against detainees from the Gaza Strip, describing it as a tool of destruction aimed at breaking individual and collective will and inflicting severe physical and psychological harm. And just a note to our listeners and viewers, the following excerpts from the report contain descriptions of sexual violence. The report cites direct sexual assault, assault with objects, and torture targeting the genitals, as well as organized practices such as filming and the presence of multiple security personnel during assaults, which reinforces evidence of the institutional and systematic nature of these crimes. The report, Euromed adds, quote, relied primarily on live testimonies from Palestinian former detainees from the Gaza Strip who were released by Israeli forces in recent weeks and months, and who reported being subjected to various forms of systematic sexual violence. Testimonies documented by the group, quote, confirm that forcing prisoners and detainees to witness sexual violence against others in Israeli detention centers was a frequent and deliberate practice. This formed part of psychological abuse and complex torture designed to create a collective impact, turn the victim's body into a tool for terrorizing detainees, break their will, and produce collective helplessness. In this context, rape and sexual assault were not only committed in secret, but in documented cases were staged as a public spectacle in courtyards and shared cells. Detainees were forced to line up or remain within direct view while others were assaulted, making the act of witnessing itself a structural component of the crime rather than a mere circumstance. This practice consisted of repeated collective humiliation rituals designed to dehumanize detainees in front of each other. Techniques included collective forced nudity, crowding detainees naked, using obscenities, and breaching social norms, such as stripping men in front of women and children, or threatening women with rape while their husbands watched. The goal was to break family bonds and create a sense of helplessness, impacting both the victims and the witnesses. We'll have much more on the details of Euromed Human Rights Monitor's report on Israel's systematic use of sexual violence and torture coming up in the following weeks. Turning to the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces fired tear gas at a group of children trying to get to their school in Masafar, south of Al-Khalil, on April 13th. Mohammed Horeini, a resident of Masafar and an activist, recorded a rampage by Jewish Israeli settlers into his village of Tuwani on April 13th. He said, settlers stormed lands in my village, Tuwani, in Masafar, bringing their sheep onto our property under the full view of the Israeli army and police. Palestinians were forcibly driven off their own land, while settlers were allowed to roam freely without any restraint. As if this was not enough, they escalated the violence by firing tear gas and stun grenades directly at us. To make matters worse, one of the residents was arrested simply in response to the settlers' demands. This is not just harassment. It is a systematic policy of intimidation and dispossession carried out in broad daylight with complete impunity. That's from Mohammed Horeini in Masafar. Meanwhile, my colleague Tamara Nassar reports this week that Israel is establishing facts on the ground in the occupied West Bank faster than ever before. She writes that, quote, in March, Israel's so-called security cabinet covertly approved the establishment of 34 new settlements, not units, entire settlements in the West Bank. News of this decision only became public last week after being kept confidential by the cabinet when it was approved, reportedly in an effort to avoid backlash from the United States during negotiations for a ceasefire with Iran. This is Israel's largest ever colonial expansion, said Francesca Albanese, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, on April 9th. This is the largest ethnic cleansing and land grab in Palestine since the Nakba. It's happening under our watch, she continued. Tamara notes that before the current government took power in 2022, there were 127 recognized Israeli settlements in the West Bank, according to the Israeli group Peace Now, which monitors settlement activity. The newly approved 34 settlements would add to 68 that the government has already advanced since its formation, bringing the total number of settlements approved under this administration to 102, Peace Now added. This is roughly an 80% increase of all settlements in the West Bank advanced under this government alone. These developments are taking place against a backdrop of accelerating settler violence against Palestinians in the West Bank, Tamara writes. At least 37 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank so far in 2026, at least 10 of them by settlers. Tamara adds that, quote, whether through de facto or de jure annexation, the Israeli objective has always been the same. The underlying logic of Zionism, as it is with any colonial movement, is the expansion of settlements and the displacement of the indigenous population to replace them with colonial settlers. Every Israeli front, whether in Gaza, the West Bank, or elsewhere, is ultimately rooted in that objective, Tamara writes. For much more, read Tamara Nassar's report, Israel's Largest Land Grab Since the Nakba, on electronicintifada.net. Turning to Lebanon, Israeli attacks across the country have killed more than 2,100 people and have injured approximately 7,000 since March 2nd. A week ago, on April 8th, as we reported, Israel hit Beirut in a barrage of strikes that killed more than 300 people within minutes. Speaking to Al Mayadeen, Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta, who is currently working in the hospital at the American University of Beirut, said that Israel's attacks were deliberately designed to overwhelm the country's healthcare system and maximize deaths. The following is from Al Mayadeen's report. Quote, in a period of 10 minutes, over 1,400 people were wounded and 340 were killed, Abu Sitta said. The aim is to flood the system, to overwhelm it, and to ensure that as many of the wounded die. He said that the scale and speed of the strikes collapsed emergency response capacity from the outset, leaving ambulance services and hospitals unable to cope with the volume of casualties. Hospitals rapidly exhausted intensive care capacity, including pediatric units, while smaller facilities were forced to transfer patients under life-threatening delays. Quote, we ran out of intensive care beds. We ran out of pediatric intensive care capacity, he said. The smaller hospitals were overwhelmed, and the delays in transferring patients cost lives. That day was the first day that felt like a day in Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital, he said. Children came in with no names, no surviving families. Nobody knew who anybody was. The scenes, he added, triggered immediate psychological recall. You find yourself thinking, not this again. For more on the aftermath of the April 8th attacks and the current situation in Lebanon, our contributor 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 filed this report for the Electronic Intifada on Wednesday evening.
I'm 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 reporting for the Electronic Intifada. It has been 1 week since what has come to be known as Black Wednesday, a devastating Israeli assault that in the span of roughly 10 minutes killed more than 300 people across Beirut and its southern suburbs. The coordinated wave of strikes carved through densely populated neighborhoods, marking one of the bloodiest days in Lebanon's recent history. As of this recording, dozens are still missing and believed to be trapped beneath the rubble, while at least 15 unidentified bodies remain in refrigerated units at Rafiq al-Hariri University Hospital in Beirut, a stark and ongoing testament to the scale of devastation. In the southern Lebanese city of Bint Jbeil, Hizballah resistance fighters continue to mount a fierce defense against ongoing Israeli attempts to seize the strategically significant location, engaging invading forces in sustained, close-range confrontations that have reportedly resulted in mounting losses. Local sources describe near daily helicopter evacuations from the outskirts of the city, with Israeli troops being transported north towards medical facilities across the border, including Rambam Medical Center and occupied Haifa. In other areas of South Lebanon, first responders continue to face Israeli airstrikes, including most recently in the town of Mayfadun, where 3 paramedics, Fadel Sarhan, Mahdi Abu Zaid, and Ali Sabra, were killed after their ambulances were intentionally targeted by Israeli forces as they attempted to tend to a previous Israeli attack. Also this week, even as Israel continues to attack towns across southern Lebanon and kill dozens of Lebanese citizens, Lebanese government representatives sat across from Israeli officials in Washington in what was presented as a peace initiative brokered by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The meeting brought together Lebanon's ambassador Nada Muawad and Israeli envoy 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐜, marking a rare direct engagement, but one that unfolded under the shadow of ongoing bombardment. The shared demands of the meeting reportedly centered on the disarmament of Hizballah and the imposition of a new security reality in the south, effectively stripping Lebanon of its only meaningful line of defense. The timing and substance of these talks have provoked sharp backlash on the ground, where they are widely viewed as capitulation and as an effort by the Lebanese political class to do through negotiations what could not be achieved on the battlefield. That is, to forcibly strip Hezbollah of its right to resist and thereby dismantle the country's only credible deterrent against Israeli aggression. As resistance fighters continue to confront Israeli forces in places like Bint Jbeil, the contrast is stark. A government engaging in negotiations from a position of weakness, while the battlefield itself continues to impose limits on Israeli advances.
That was 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿 reporting for the Electronic Intifada from Lebanon on Wednesday. We've published many features in the last week, but we wanted to highlight Women Recount Abuse at Hands of Israeli Military by Ehud Nassar, writing from Gaza. Nassar profiles two women, Sharifa Kudih and Saja Abdel-Al, who she says reveal some of what women have endured during Israeli military incursions into Gaza's neighborhoods, a trajectory that begins but does not end with airstrikes and displacement. In a narrow corridor inside a government school that has been converted into a shelter in the city of Khan Yunis in Gaza's south, Sharifa Kudih, 50, sits on a piece of cardboard while families pass endlessly around her. Unmarried and with no children to care for, this corridor is all that remains, she said, after her home in the town of Abasan al-Kabira, east of Khan Yunis, was destroyed. In February 2024, Sharifa said, around 5:30 a.m., she was asleep in her home when it was bombed. I woke up to a massive explosion and then found myself under the rubble, she said. She was not badly injured, but was trapped beneath the debris for nearly 2 hours before invading Israeli troops heard her and pulled her out. When they took me out, I thought I was going to die or be taken prisoner, she said. Instead, she told the Electronic Intifada, the soldiers ordered her to remove her hijab, the scarf covering her hair, and tied her hands. Then they questioned her. They asked me why I was in the house and about names of people. I didn't know any of them. Soldiers sat her on a chair on her own devastated land as they continued their operations. Sharifa said the soldiers then used her as a human shield alongside a group of young men. They forced us to walk in front of them, she said. Human rights organizations have documented hundreds of cases in which the Israeli military broke international law, including using women and children as human shields. Photos were taken of Sharifa while she was seated on a chair on a mound of earth with Israeli soldiers crouching behind her, apparently combat ready. She only discovered this later when an Israeli soldier received an award for the photo, which was apparently taken by drone, and said she gave no consent and was not asked for any. I was shocked when acquaintances sent me a photo of myself displayed in a gallery in Tel Aviv. I had no idea they had photographed me. After the soldiers finished with her, they let her go, a surveillance drone monitoring her from above, she said. She had to walk over rubble for more than an hour to get away from the area and to safety. Sharifa now lives in the corridor of the government school in Khan Yunis. She has neither a mattress nor a blanket. She sleeps like she sits on a piece of cardboard that was distributed as humanitarian aid. Her home was completely destroyed, and she has nowhere else to go. Those are excerpts from Women Recount Abuse at Hands of Israeli Military by Ehud Nassar, a journalist and teacher writing from Gaza on electronicintifada.net. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and reclamation across Palestine and around the world. Photographer Samer Abu Samra captured video of a volleyball game in northern Gaza this week. Abu Samra Abu Samra writes, quote, "In the Jabalia refugee camp, at the Abu Hussein school, and on the Yellow Line, from the school's rubble, we make life. We play and dream, and we believe that hope is not defeated." And 2 children in Gaza, Mira and Ahed, whose parents post videos of them on social media, sang a love song to their sweet tea with mint.
ازاي اوصف لك يا حبيبي الشاي شاي بالنعناع والسكر يا حبيبي يا شاي.
And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. How are you?
Hanging in. Hanging in. How are you?
Yeah, hanging in there too. We all are.
Yeah.
I'm, readjusting to being in the
Yes.
United States, which
Welcome
is
back, I
a
think.
culture shock.
Yeah.
And I know people monitor my background, so that they know I'm somewhere else. Our viewers are very, very observant.
Astute. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's interesting to see how the war is present, but also in the background in the United States compared with being in the region where it is dominant. And I just want to say thank you for all that information. Particularly, it was incredible to hear from Ruqayya Shamsuddin in Lebanon.
Extraordinary. Yeah.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
And also the new report from Euromed on the sexual violence and torture against Palestinians in Israel's torture and rape dungeons.
Yeah.
That's a descriptive terminology. We're going to have, as you mentioned, we're not going to have a show next week, but we are going to cover that in a lot more detail, probably in the following show.
That's great. Thanks for that. I mean, I read excerpts of the full, I think it's like a 70-page report, and I read as many excerpts as I could without feeling sick to my stomach. And it is, Euromed identified 7 types of sexual violence, and they go in detail.
It's truly horrific.
Yeah.
And I'm reading the report now, I can say that, but we are going to cover it in more detail.
Good. And of course, this is not a new policy. This is not just revelations from 2026 or even from 2023. But of course, this has been systematic Israeli policy since the beginning of the establishment of the settler colony. And I came across this old documentary. I think it was made in the 70s or 80s, and in it was about torture and violence against women, specifically Palestinian women by Israeli prison guards. And in it were people like Leila Khaled and Rasmia Oda. They were talking about their experiences with sexual violence in prison. And just, I don't know, it's just, we need these reports. We need this kind of, documentation as much as possible. And especially since it has accelerated in policy since 2023. But again, these are not new policies. These are not new tactics that Israel uses, especially against women. So thank you for diving into that. And it's important to keep documenting. We have a wonderful and very important interview that you and I did a couple days ago with 2 activists and scholars in Tehran. Ali, why don't you introduce that segment and give a little update on the current news?
Yeah, I'm going to give an update, and then we'll get into the discussion that we recorded earlier this week.
Yeah.
Just a reminder that you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Ali Abunimah here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman. Since the April 7th ceasefire announcement, the trajectory of the US-Israeli war in Iran has been defined less by de-escalation than by repositioning, military, diplomatic, and economic, on all sides, with the clear expectation that full-scale fighting could return. As the Washington Post is reporting, the US is, as we speak, sending thousands more troops to the vicinity of Iran. Let's start with the failed negotiations in Islamabad last weekend. These talks were never especially promising, but the gap became unmistakable in the public statements that followed. US Vice President J.D. Vance reiterated Washington's core demands, essentially an Iranian capitulation on key aspects of its sovereignty and security, including giving up nuclear enrichment and handing over its stock of enriched uranium, sharing control of and revenue from the Strait of Hormuz with the United States, Iran limiting its defensive military capabilities and abandoning its regional allies in the axis of resistance. Iranian officials, including senior figures in the Foreign Ministry and the Supreme National Security Council, rejected this framework outright, insisting that Iran's missile program and its alliances are non-negotiable. The widest gaps are therefore structural, not technical. Washington is attempting to achieve through so-called negotiations what it and Israel failed to take by force. Tehran is signaling that it will absorb pressure, including economic pressure, rather than concede on those fundamentals. And while President Donald Trump may want a way out of a politically, economically, and militarily costly and disastrous war of aggression, Israel apparently does not. As Professor Mohammad Marandi revealed, since the Islamabad talks, J.D. Vance took calls from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu while the U.S. Vice President was still in Islamabad. It was after that that Vance abruptly withdrew. Here's how Abbas Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister, summed things up after the Islamabad talks. He wrote, "In intensive talks at the highest level in 47 years, Iran engaged with the US in good faith to end the war. But when just inches away from an Islamabad memorandum of understanding, we encountered maximalism, shifting goalposts, and blockade. Zero lessons learned. Goodwill begets goodwill. Enmity begets enmity." Despite the ceasefire, the US has escalated materially by announcing a naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz beginning earlier this week. This is an attempt to counter Iran's control of the strait by choking Iran's ability to sell oil. But this only exacerbates a problem that the United States created and is now desperate to solve. After it launched the war, the United States was forced to unsanction Iranian oil in order to increase the rapidly diminishing global supply. Now, if the US successfully restricts Iran's ability to export, the US will hurt the rest of the world much more than it is likely to hurt Iran, at least in the near term. All signals from Iran are that after decades under US sanctions, it is prepared to endure a prolonged confrontation in order to break free and secure its sovereignty and independence. And because Iran maintains fire control over the Strait of Hormuz, it can continue to restrict all other shipping. If Iran's vessels cannot go in and out, nor will anyone else's. Iran and its allies also still have the ability to escalate by closing off the Red Sea via the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is controlled by Yemen. That would not only shut off Saudi Arabia's remaining outlet for oil and gas through the Red Sea port of Yanbu, but it could also shut down all transit traffic through the Suez Canal. If this situation persists, the energy crisis facing many countries could turn into a severe shortage within weeks. Many countries have already introduced rationing or taken other measures to restrict energy use. Today, the head of the International Energy Agency said that Europe has, quote, maybe 6 weeks or so of jet fuel left. And it's not just oil and gas that are coming out of the Gulf, that are not coming out of the Gulf region. Fertilizer and other commodities needed for global agriculture and industry are not flowing either, all of which risks an unprecedented economic crisis and even food shortages or famine. Despite this, there are renewed, if fragile, prospects for diplomacy. President Trump has publicly indicated openness to a new deal, while the Iranian leadership has signaled conditional willingness to re-engage on the basis of mutual concessions, not capitulation. On Wednesday, Pakistani Army Chief Asim Munir arrived in Tehran, reportedly carrying a message from the United States. This renewed effort reflects a recognition that the conflict started by the United States and Israel is no longer containable. Lebanon is now central to this equation. The United States agreed explicitly that Lebanon was included in the April 7th ceasefire, but quickly reneged on that, undoubtedly under Israeli pressure. Iran has made the inclusion of Lebanon in any ceasefire a condition for further negotiations. On Wednesday, Israeli media reported that Israel's Security Cabinet was meeting to discuss a ceasefire in Lebanon under US pressure, but overnight Israel escalated its bombardment of towns across southern Lebanon. The same day, Mohammad Baqir Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, who had led the delegation to Islamabad, reiterated that a ceasefire in Lebanon was non-negotiable. He wrote, "The completion and consolidation of a comprehensive ceasefire in Lebanon will be the result of the resistance and steadfast struggle of the great Hizballah and the unity of the axis of resistance. The United States must comply with the agreement. Resistance and Iran are one soul, both in war and in ceasefire. America should withdraw from the Israel First mistake." Well, a short time ago, US President Donald Trump announced a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah to go into effect at midnight local time. That's just a couple of hours from now. I just had excellent conversations with the highly respected President Joseph Aoun of Lebanon and Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu of Israel, Trump wrote on Truth Social. These two leaders have agreed that in order to achieve peace between their countries, they will formally begin a 10-day ceasefire, Trump added. What that will mean in practice remains to be seen, given how Israel's idea of a ceasefire is always that only the other side should stop firing. But the big picture here is that what Iran is doing, in addition to standing by its allies, is forcing a wedge between the United States and Israel. In order to solve its problems with Tehran, Washington must pressure Israel to end its aggression against Lebanon, exposing the contradictions between US and Israeli interests and preferences. Meanwhile, we've already seen the first open meeting between Lebanese and Israeli officials brokered by the United States. This is an attempt to normalize relations between Israel and the Lebanese state in the face of Israel's ongoing occupation and attacks on the country. It is bitterly opposed by the resistance movement Hezbollah and much of Lebanon's population. And Hezbollah says that it will not stop defending the country, and it will certainly not disarm. So where does this leave us? The 2-week ceasefire is set to expire on Monday. Of course, a return to full-scale fighting could occur at any time and could quickly escalate out of control. Today, Mohammad Marandi of the University of Tehran tweeted this warning. He wrote, "Because of Netanyahu and Trump, Iran is preparing to destroy everything in the Persian Gulf, including all critical infrastructure in the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. Temperatures will rise, the peninsula will become uninhabitable, and the global economy will crash." With the stakes so high, there might be an extension to provide further room for talks, but it remains difficult to see any way out that does not involve the United States making major concessions and admitting the failure of its war. Iran is not going to surrender its sovereignty. Even if there is no immediate return to fighting, what may be emerging instead is a prolonged confrontation with intermittent escalation, economic warfare through the Strait of Hormuz, continued Israeli aggression in Lebanon and, of course, in Palestine, particularly Gaza, and a stalled but not collapsed diplomatic track. What can be in no doubt is that the balance of power has changed. Washington and Tel Aviv can no longer just dictate terms, nor can Iran and its allies be coerced or bombed into strategic retreat. To put these latest developments in context, Nora Barrows-Friedman and I spoke earlier this week with University of Tehran researchers Sara Larijani and Taha Zeinali. They are the co-founders of the Center for Resistance, Development and Sovereignty Studies and the co-creators of the We Defend Iran social media campaign. Let's watch that interview now.
Joining us to talk about the current situation in Iran are Sara Larijani and Taha Zeinali, both scholars and researchers at the University of Tehran. They are the co-founders of the Center for Resistance, Development, and Sovereignty Studies there. Sara and Taha, thank you so much for being with us on the Electronic Intifada podcast and live stream.
Hello, Nora. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us.
It's wonderful to have you both with us. Sara, let's talk with you first. Let's start with you. Your thoughts on last week's agreement by the U.S. and Iran to a 2-week ceasefire, as well as the U.S. agreeing to adopt Iran's 10 points as a basis for negotiations. And then, of course, Trump's reneging on the conditions, followed by the negotiations in Pakistan, which the U.S. delegation left after only 1 day. Your thoughts on the political developments over the last week?
Maybe I can start with the moment that we heard the news. We were in Revolution Square waiting for Trump's deadline because people wanted to be together, and all the squares and streets were filled with people, at least in Tehran. There were a lot of discussions going on in the square, right? And I was waiting for a new tweet saying that I'm going to extend this another 48 hours. And on the other side, I was quite I assured myself that it's not going to be a blackout or what he's trying to name as a Stone Age, but maybe he's going to attack some of the important power plants or bridges in the country again and call it a victory. I did not expect a call for ceasefire, although from the evening we were hearing some, I would say, not official statements or comments on internet that there is going to be there's going to be ceasefire and negotiations. And when I heard first, I freeze because I didn't expect this to happen. But I was thinking, and then I came to the conclusion that I am not in the position because I don't have the data to judge if this is something that is going to affect the movement that has started with the US-Israeli war of aggression against Iran in a negative way, in a sense. And I don't have accurate data of our military capacities, of our military strategies. On the other side, I don't know about the governance capabilities at the moment. So I decided to wait and see. On the other side, I was completely sure that the United States is not going to accept the Iranian 10 points because that means to accept Iranian sovereignty in the region and accept one of the main choke points of the oil economy and also naval system to be controlled by Iran. So pessimistic, but I was I was confident with the decisions of the Iranian side. This was not the case with some of the analysts or some figures who talked about, oh, there is going to be another round of negotiations, and this is some sort of a coup or betrayal. I was totally in disagreement with that segment, because it meant that they did not understand what happened in the past 40 days. Yes, we had grave experiences with JCPOA, and in the last year, there were 2 rounds of negotiations, both of which ended into a war on Iran. But what happened in the 40 days changes the equation of sitting around a table. And this time, I believe that Iran had the upper hand in the negotiation. So I decided to wait and see.
And Taha, your thoughts as well. I mean, you know, as Sara said, this comes after the U.S. White House, you know, Trump himself saying that he was going to wipe out an entire civilization. And then, you know, within, I don't know, a day or so, he seemed to concede to Iran's 10-point plan, and then, you know, reversed, and now we have, you know, JD Vance walking out on these negotiations that Iran came to in good faith in Islamabad. What are your thoughts on what happens next? Is escalation the next step here for the U.S. and Israel, which we'll get to later on? But what is Iran's position now politically and militarily after the talks have collapsed?
The ceasefire was put forward by the US, as we know, and Iran has accepted it from the position of strength. As you mentioned, we have all seen that Iran's 10 points terms were accepted, although it was contested later, like in the media, but we know that despite the ultimatum, which was intended to impose a surrender or impose certain conditions by the US, it was Iran that has brought its 10 points conditions. And as you said, Iran engaged in the negotiations with a good faith and with a serious team. It was a complete representatives of Islamic Republic of Iran, the Speaker of Parliament, the representative of the Iranian Foreign Minister, representative of the Iran Supreme National Security Council, and Iran Supreme Defense Council. So, I mean, it was a complete and serious team, like engaged there in the negotiations. But of course, it failed because the US wanted to impose the terms, which was in contradiction with the new strategic reality following this military aggression imposed on Iran. I think before talking about what comes next, I wanted to mention that this war and Iran's resistance and the resistance of all the allies across the region constitute a profound turning point. And the military aggression aimed at weakening Iran, but Iran and its allies emerged stronger than before. So this means that we now have Islamic Republic of Iran is stronger than before and more radicalized, and the political factions that are pro-resistance and pro-defiance are stronger than ever, maybe in last years. So this is a new reality. So this does not suggest that Iran will accept the terms imposed by the US before the war, which was like zero enrichment included. So the relations, the power balance has been changed after this military aggression in favor of the resistance axis. So this does not suggest that Iran will surrender or accept the terms. This means that the resistance will be stronger. And we know that the military aggression has ended for a temporary time. And from Iranian perspective, the war changes forms. It doesn't end. It changes forms. And we know that the direct military intervention can pause, but then we have regime change operations, intensification of blockade and sanctions, and other multifaceted coercive measures that U.S. has been imposing on Iran. But in the short term, I believe Iranian defense forces and Iranian political establishment are ready for a new round of military aggression. And of course, this idea of, or the decision by Washington to impose its own blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, it sounds ridiculous. And this could lead to escalation in the Persian Gulf. And this could be a trigger for a new round of military aggression. Putting together, I believe the war can continue in any time, either by the U.S. and forces or by the Zionist entity, and Iranian forces are ready for that.
Sara and Taha, thank you so much for joining us. Sara, I want to ask you, last week on Wednesday, so almost a week ago, Israel carried out a horrific, almost unprecedented massacre in Lebanon, bombarding Beirut, and in the space of a few minutes, killing hundreds of people. This generated absolute horror and disgust everywhere around the world. And in Iran, from what we could see from the outside, there was a lot of demands from the Iranian public that the Iranian military should respond to this massacre carried out by Israel. Later, we heard a statement from the Iranian deputy foreign minister saying that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps was on the verge of launching a retaliation, but at the request of Pakistan, which was brokering the ceasefire, the IRGC decided not to carry out the attack in order to give the negotiations and the ceasefire a chance. But the question of Israel's role in all of this remains there. Israel has not agreed to a ceasefire with respect to Lebanon. At the same time, there does appear to be a ceasefire for the moment between Iran and Israel on the one hand, and between Iran and the United States on the other hand. So how do you see the position of Lebanon in this? And talk in particular about the reaction from the Iranian public on the question of Lebanon. Are Iranians, of course, I understand there are different views, but are they seeing this as one front, or are there those who say, well, what's in Iran's interest is what we should pursue and leave Lebanon aside? Are those debates happening, and what do they look like?
Perhaps I can start with the Iranian public, and maybe Taha can follow on the levels of the discussions on the government. From the morning, people came back to the street because of the breach of ceasefire, because Lebanon was included in the 10 points that Iranian set on the table. So people came to the squares, and everyone was talking about the ceasefire has been breached, and we have to act upon this. And you could see how it has changed in form. after this, like I think it was midday already, that the Tehran municipality started to put these posters everywhere in metro stations, on the autobahns, that we will not leave Lebanon. Iran will not leave Lebanon. And also during the 40 days ceremony of Ayatollah Khamenei, you could see the flag of Hezbollah on the entrance of Khamenei's bait. So it was, one side was the Iranian flag, and the other side it was the Hezbollah flag. And the number of Hezbollah flags was enormous, like through this ceremony, and also since then, every night that we join the gatherings in the squares, there are many flags of Hezbollah, and people all talk about this. So this is a demand by Iranian public, the part of Iranian people who defended their lands from the day one on the squares and streets, that the our cause is not separated from the cause of people of Lebanon, people of Palestine, and the resistance front in general. So you also, Ali, mentioned that you know that this is not the totality of Iranian population, of course, but what I understand as people in this moment is it's that part of the public that is vocal, that is present, and has the principle of defending the country and defending the cause of resistance against imperialism and Zionism. This is the atmosphere in the countries. With this in mind, people of Iran now demand their government and their military forces to respond accordingly to the brutal and savage bombardment of Lebanon, and to show this also to the resistance, to the allies in the resistance front who have supported Iran.
And, Taha, thinking about the way you and Sara are presenting this issue, and the way you just described it, it's a question of defending Iran's sovereignty and independence, which is an understanding that I've heard from other commentators in Iran. When we look at how Iran is discussed in the West, particularly the United States media and from the government, Iran is presented as an aggressive country, as a radical country, as a country that is seeking weapons in order to carry out aggression against others. The obsession with the nuclear issue is a representative of that. How do people in Iran, again, we're generalizing, but you can address it however you want. How do they understand or explain that Western hostility towards Iran? When they look at it, they say, do people in Iran say, what do they have against us? Do they understand this purely in terms of sovereignty and independence, that the West does not tolerate sovereign and independent countries? Or do they see it through other prisms, a religious prism or a cultural prism? How do people in Iran understand this enmity towards their country?
And thank you for that question, because it's been one of the most important issues that I've been personally engaged, and my mind was occupied on that. And as you mentioned, one cannot generalize the people of Iran. And the Iranian people, particularly following the reactionary insurrection and the bloody insurrection that we have seen in January, the people was divided. So, like, I mean, I don't know how many, like, one cannot like estimate the numbers, but we could have understood through our interpersonal conversations and also any researches that part of the people were pro-resistance and supporting the Islamic Republic of Iran, and another part was more critical of the Islamic Republic of Iran and somewhat more in line with Western factions, or even in like some sections supporting the oppositions in diaspora. However, and when the war started, still there were some discourses produced by the foreign led and financed the media, the international, Iran International, and so forth, that this war is a Islamic Republic of Iran. This war is not against Iran. So this is a war that doesn't should not be seen as a danger to the Iranian territorial integrity, Iranian sovereignty. However, uh, after the war, particularly following the bombardment of Iranian infrastructure, and of course the civilian civilian buildings, including the Minab school and so many hospitals and schools and universities and bridges and everywhere. And not only the part of the people who who have been supporting the resistance are more solid and more vocal and more stronger, and they occupy the streets and the squares and public spaces calling for the strong retaliation. That section of society who have been always supporting the resistance and defiance, they are stronger than ever. They occupy this city and this streets and public spaces. And also among those people who were somehow illusioned by the Western founded media regarding the essence of our enemy, they have they now seeing much better than before that this is a war against Iran. And they now understand that when the Trump administration, Trump himself, threatening bringing back Iran to the Stone Age, this is a genocidal entity. This doesn't need to be interpreted by any analyst. It's very clear. So more and more people now, the majority of Iranian people now understand that Islamic Republic of Iran and particularly its defense forces are defending Iran against a genocidal enemy, including the Zionist regime and the US imperialism that has been always following the Iranian revolution, imposing all coercive measures to contain Iran. And now it's involved, both the enemies are involved in direct military intervention, threatening all kind of massacre and imposing genocide. So that's one of the reasons that I mentioned that this has been a profound turning point, because we're living in a transformative moment, which I think it was initiated following the assassination of Iran's supreme leader, the martyrdom of Ayatollah Zeinali Khamenei, which has been intended to fragment the political system, to empower those political factions that are more in line with strategic compromises. However, this has been backfired profoundly. And we see now, following that martyrdom, the political system is more consolidated and more cohesive than before. The society, in a mass level, is more united and are more more openly supporting the Iranian defensive forces. And also the martyrdom has some kind of an effect of revival of revolutionary spirit. So we can see that, particularly following the unfolding of Iran's sovereign control on the Strait of Hormuz, people, analysts, political elites, all are talking that Iran is emerging stronger than before, and this is an outcome of the resistance, because it's been a long time that there were some more so-called moderate, but I would call pro-Western voices counterposing resistance and development. And the discourse was intended to impose kind of a development path, which is only possible through normalization with the West. But that discourse is undermined following this transformative moment. Now we see that Iran can have a stronger development path following the resistance. There is the only way that we can hold our sovereign control on our natural resources, our political sovereignty, and we can have our own the strategy and agenda in regional order making together with other resistance forces in the region.
And it's interesting, just again from our distant perspective, to see, and again, every government engages in, you could say, public relations. It has an interest in presenting itself as the most capable and the most competent. And of course, no government on earth is perfect. We understand that. At the same time, it's impressive to see Iranians saying, after 10 days, we repaired this bridge or that railway line, which is also part of the narrative of showing a country that is capable of resisting and recovering from an attack which the United States and Israel boast about how many thousands of air attacks they carried out and so on. And yet Iran is saying, we are still there. We're still capable of following our own path. So that's, I'm thinking of that as I'm listening to you, Taha. Let's shift to, you mentioned the Strait of Hormuz. I remember the Strait of Hormuz as a center of geopolitical contestation from the time of the Iran-Iraq War, and then for quite a few decades, nobody talked about the Strait of Hormuz, and now it's back. In a sense, Iran always controlled the Strait of Hormuz, but never exercised that control in the way it's doing now. And it's been said that the Strait of Hormuz, in a way, is more powerful than a nuclear weapon. How are people in Iran looking at the issue of the Strait of Hormuz? Are they afraid of the blockade that Trump has announced, or are they saying, we're calm, we're confident, we're in control? How does it play in a political sense within Iran? And how do you see it internationally? And that's for either Taha or Sara, whoever wishes to take it.
Maybe I can start with the actual development, and Sara can add the historical background and the history of colonial domination of the Persian Gulf and Iranian resistance. And regarding the public, and particularly among the people who are vocal, who are in the streets, they see this development as the most significant outcome of this war and resistance. And this is the embodiment, one of the most important embodiment of Iran emerging stronger rather than weaker following this military aggression. As you correctly mentioned, of course, Iran had this maintain this power and the potential control on the Strait of Hormuz. But I believe this has been like the exercise of control over Strait of Hormuz. This was a strategic unfolding of Iran's sovereign control. So we didn't have this for long. And this has been calculated, implemented, planned by like Iranian defensive forces, led by the martyred Brigadier General Tangsiri. He was a hero, an Iranian hero. So he developed this control, the sovereign control of the Strait of Hormuz, and this cannot be taken back. And this is not open for negotiation. We have a powerful measure in the Persian Gulf where like a significant portion of energy and commercial ships are passing. So this is one of the key choke points that like in global economy and energy, like naval corridors, that now Iran has the sovereign control. The public demands that we hold this control. We sanction the enemy as they sanction us, which means that we only will have sanction release concerning our sanctions, like counter sanctions. I must say, maybe we can think about the measures that like lifts counter sanctions vis-a-vis lifting financial sanctions. So if before we had to talk about the compromises in our nuclear facilities in order to get reversible and partial sanctions relief, now we are open to negotiate that we can have this reversible partial sanctions relief concerning one of the key choke points that we have the sovereign control over, like in exchange for the sanctions relief that the US-led imperialism have concerning its certain control over the global financial architecture. So this means that like Iranian strategic power has developed significantly. And interestingly, people in the street, they see this. They see that this is how like how giant is this like powerful development.
If that's okay, I would like to add a historical depth into this argument. You mentioned the Iran-Iraq War. I want to move to the Second World War, when the Iranian oil, the southwest Iran, was completely controlled by British. And when the war started, they had their military on our ground, and they formed the South Persia Police to control our land. This is the Second World War. And at that time, the plan was, if the German army reaches Egypt, they will destroy all oil facilities on our land, and it was named constructive destruction. So we have that moment, and then we have our oil nationalization, very much influenced by the decision of the imperial order of the time. So we nationalize our oil, and then this is the British naval or the British Army who closes the Strait of Hormuz, and they do not let any of our oil go out now that we nationalize our oil. And then they put an embargo on the country, that we had food shortages because of the British embargo on our waterways. Then we had to compromise to the oil consortium of the 1954. So then we have the revolution, and then we have the Iran-Iraq war. Was an intense situation for an army, for people just raised from a revolution with a lot of difficulties that raised after the revolution. And then we have a neighbor attacking on us, supported by the imperial forces. And for the people or for, let's say, for the people who are interested in the history, this is a victorious moment that finally, in the modern history of the country, we stand and we call it our waterways. This is Iran who is controlling Strait of Hormuz, and in other words, the Persian Gulf and the natural resources, the oil and gas of this region in its own hands. I'm not sure if we can hold this. We know by history and the playbooks of the imperial forces that whenever the resistance has an obvious and visible victory, they can they will revive in a more savage mood, in a more brutal mood, and we expect that this moment of victory and this battle can bring difficulty in the future from the imperial and the Zionist side. But I think this is a moment that is, as Taha was saying about the turning points, this is not only a turning point for Iran, reading its history, or the region, it is a global turning point in a sense.
Indeed, indeed it is. And we just have a couple of minutes left. I want to ask you both about the campaign that you're a part of. It's you know, around the streets of Tehran, you and some of your comrades have been recording yourselves and interviewing others to talk about your perspectives on the war that has been waged upon you by the US and Israel. The campaign is called We Defend Iran, and you've been posting videos both in English and Farsi since the war began. The videos themselves are simple but very well produced. They're mostly first-person narratives or short interviews with others. And some of the videos that you published in the past couple of weeks were about the bombing of the Tehran-Karaj bridge. And there's another one of a former student of the Iran University of Science and Technology who came back to the country to be part of rebuilding it after the US and Israel destroyed the university. Let's take a look at just a minute or so of that specific video.
The history in Iran is very long. We have witnessed the Alexander the Great who set fire on Persepolis, but we keep it as a priceless experience and a very valuable lesson. We will never forget this destruction. We will rebuild this building. I'm here back in my country to rebuild this, to be part of this rebuild, and I'm committed. I know so many other people that are committed. We rely on the saver missile industry in our region to save our people in our region and rebuild it like what we did in missiles, and we will make it even better. We will rely on the elites who are successful to develop the edge of the technologies in our missile industries, in our nuclear industries, and so on.
Sara, tell us about why you and Taha and others are part of this campaign, why you began it, and what it aims to do.
We started it, we started to talk about it from the first day of war, and Taha was explaining about the Iranian society being divided after the January insurrection. And we were, in our environment, we were dealing more with people who have been mesmerized by the pro-Western media. So we started to find these people one by one in the past few months. Most of them have migrated back to the country, especially after October 7, because most of us could not take the level of atrocity and the level of silencing the voices of pro-Palestinian people in Europe and in North America. So putting these two beside one another, defending the resistance and Palestinian cause, and being vocal about the genocide in Gaza, and having people around us, friends, colleagues, family, who do not see these interconnected causes, we decided to be vocal on the first day of war. We said there are probably many other people like us that they are thinking of these causes and the righteousness of the resistance, and they are afraid maybe to talk. They are silenced by the very loud and brutal and aggressive voices of these pro-Western, I would call them even fascists. So we decided to be vocal. We decided to go on the streets and loudly talk about our anti-imperialist, pro-Palestine, and pro-Iran stances. And when we started, a documentary filmmaker found us, and that was him who had the possibility to go to the sites that they were bombed. So he helped us to go also to these sites. And now, after 40 days, people recognize us. And I think we had a very small, I would say, we were a very small voice beside all these voices, religious or otherwise, that have defended the resistance, the Palestinian cause, and the Iran sovereignty.
When you talk about defending the resistance or speaking up in terms of seeing the resistance in Palestine is connected to Iran's struggle, who are you addressing? Are you addressing an audience within Iran or primarily an audience outside Iran?
Both. So we produce Farsi narratives, which finds a connected language with the people who have an imaginative geography of their country, and the Arabs and the West. So in the Farsi narratives, we have different talking points. We try to influence those who are silenced by these fascists and pro-monarchists. And they think because their environment looks like that, this is the majority of people, so they can be vocal. This is the agenda in Iran. And what we try to do in English is raising our solidarity with the people of Palestine, with the people of Lebanon, and with the people of Global South, because we also believe what happened, the US-Israeli aggression against Iran. And since the turning point that we believe started by October 7 in Gaza, there is a new revival of hope in the Global South to resist the imperial forces, the neo-colonial forces. Well, of course, with the brutality that we are seeing these days, it's difficult to formulate it within the neo-colonial. It is more like the old colonial style, what's happening now. So I lost my thoughts, but yes, there are two different audiences and two different talking points.
May I add something there? Like to the Iranian public, our message was very, very simple and basic, and which was like, we defend Iran. This is the national defense. This is the war against Iran imposed by the genocidal regimes, the Zionist entity and the US imperialism. And this has become more and more clear that who is the enemy, who is defending the country and the people and the security of the people. This was, of course, intended to communicate with those parts of the society which were not supporting the resistance, right? And we try to like contribute in the discourse that the resistance axis includes forces that represents the subordinated nations of the region, who has one enemy or like same enemy, the settler colonial regime in the region, in occupied Palestine, and US imperialism. And interestingly, I mean, we didn't think that this will be a magical move, but we have got so many feedbacks by those who were initially not supporting the defensive forces, Iranian defensive forces, let alone other resistance forces. And like, I want to come back to your question concerning Lebanon. I have talked with some of my former friends, like the friends that they have kind of different opinion on the resistance. And we were talking about this, that how Lebanese resistance forces intervened in defending Iran when Iran was faced by the military aggression. This was a significant development for their their mindsets, and this was something that they have kind of tried to ignore for long, but when they have seen that the Hezbollah, the resistance forces in Lebanon and other, especially in Iraq and Yemen and other forces, engaged in one war against one enemy. So I think this contributed far more than so many media outputs and books and articles. It was a significant development, incident. And connecting, in connection to that, I want to mention that people in the street, those people who were chanting that we should continue the resistance, they demand a strong response concerning the massacre in Lebanon. And we trust our defensive forces. We trust our Brigadier General, Sayyid Majid Musavi. He promised that there will be a severe punishment. And he has shown that we can trust him. We can trust the Islamic Republic of Iran. And concerning the political system, the political elites, and especially following this war, we see that they rally behind defensive forces. So we are waiting for the moment that the Zionist entity will be punished by Iranian defensive forces.
Well, Nora, do you have anything?
No, I was just gonna just express my gratitude for both of you for doing this work. And I want to direct people to your social media campaign, We Defend Iran. It's on Twitter X. The handle is We Defend Iran 26. So people can go there to watch the videos that you've been producing so steadily over the last, 40 plus days. And thank you both for being with us on the Electronic Intifada, Sara Larijani and Taha Zeinali, both scholars and researchers at the University of Tehran. You're also the co-founders of the Center for Resistance, Development, and Sovereignty Studies, and you're both members of, as I said, We Defend Iran on social media. Sara and Taha, thank you so much for your time and for being with us on the Electronic Intifada.
Thank you, Nora, and thank you, Ali. It was a pleasure to have a discussion with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yes, that was just a really fantastic discussion. I think we got into so much, especially around the historical analysis of what, U.S.-led imperial power and control in the region has done to Iran and has tried to do and has failed to do as well. So yeah, thanks to everyone for making that happen. Oh, Ali, you're muted.
Yeah, the discussion really helped me understand kind of how the current war, but also the attacks on Iran for decades have consolidated the national cohesion, as Taha said, renewal of the revolution, and that potentially puts Iran in a much stronger position in terms of internal cohesiveness to withstand any prolonged war that's imposed on it. Again, Iran never chose this war, but if they have to fight it, they seem to be as prepared as any country can be.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, speaking of defending their country, there's so much that's happened in the last week in Lebanon, especially in the south of Lebanon. Let's bring Jon on to talk about Hizballah. Hi.
Hello,
Jon.
Another great interview. It's great to hear from people on the ground. I mean, it's amazing that we get 24/7 wall-to-wall media coverage in the West, and we basically never hear from anyone inside Iran.
No, but if they are, they're the ones doing the bidding and,
saying
and
that they want to
encouraging.
be bombed.
That's right. That's right.
You know, I watched, after coming back to the US, I decided to watch, I think it was NBC coverage of the war, just to see what I'm missing. And it was like so childish. Is the most kind thing I can say about it. You will never get that kind of in-depth historical contextualized analysis. You'll never get the kind of coverage we have here on the Electronic Intifada that you're doing, Jon. The way they were talking about the Iranian naval capabilities was, it was such a joke, you know. So it was, you know.
And that's by design. It is by design, you know.
Yeah. You don't get those jobs if you're sharp.
Yeah.
Or have any sort of historical analysis or can talk about context and reality. No, never. Well, Jon, you're going to be taking us through the battle over the last week, especially in the south of Lebanon, as Israel attempts to invade and capture land in Lebanon, as well as some of the political military maneuvers in the Strait of Hormuz.
That's right.
So there's a lot to get to it. Why don't, Ali, do you want to do the honors?
Take it away, Jon.
All right. You are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 923 of Israel's genocide in Gaza, day 48 of the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran, and day 45 of Hezbollah's defense of South Lebanon. Let's take a look first at the Strait of Hormuz, and then we'll get to Hezbollah's combat videos shortly. Just a new view here for the Strait of Hormuz, obviously the center of the world economy right now, hanging on by a thread. The International Monetary Fund said there would be a global recession. They described it as the biggest supply disruption in world history, and we're only just beginning it. There's a good shot on the screen there of the area in question, and it also shows the depths of the water and just how shallow the strait is, how shallow the Gulf is. And at this current point, the blockade went into effect, the U.S. blockade went into effect on Sunday. Ironically, just before the American blockade went into effect, more ships had exited the Gulf than at any point since the war had begun. And so the U.S. blockade is attempting to snuff that out at the expense of the world's oil, gas, and then all the derivatives that come from those petroleum products that are all basically made in the Gulf that you see there: Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait, and of course Saudi Arabia. And the U.S. is talking about interdicting ships. That's the way that they're planning to do it. And they talked about some of that happening in Iranian waters. We'll see about that. They have not been coming anywhere near Iranian waters. partially because of something Trump admitted to the other day, that more than 110 missiles and drones were fired at the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, which keeps it more than 1,000 kilometers from Iran in the Arabian Sea. There's a third aircraft carrier. The second aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, is in dry dock in Europe, and the George H.W. Bush is en route. We'll get to that in a moment. But this is Iran flexing a capability that they have always had, but they have not used, to control the Strait of Hormuz, which overwhelmingly runs through Iranian waters. And as Iran has said, there are wartime conditions in that strait. Namely, the enemies that are attacking Iran are not going to be able to travel. And because of that, there's more than 3,200 ships stuck in the Gulf right now. We can look at the next slide. You can see the blockade. You can see the ships stacked up on either side. Those are the ships that are waiting to cross. The red ships are waiting to cross. But the ships that are just stuck in the Gulf are not lit up in this map from Maritime Tracker. As I said, 3,200 ships. That was as of March 18th, and we know that only a small trickle have gotten out since then. We hear a lot about 20% of the oil, 20% of the natural gas, but it's significant what derivatives are also go through the strait, including helium, sulfur, and those are key. The helium supply is key in medical machines and in a lot of chip making. These are core products that the world uses that are being broken in the supply chain. And also some of the largest ports, like the port in the UAE, which is the Jebel Ali port, is one of the busiest container terminals in the world. They're effectively shut down. So the blockade that Trump has put in place, the people that it stands to hurt the most are the Gulf countries, the Gulf allies of the United States, so-called allies, who have been definitely gotten short shrift in this war as allies. Of course, they've been hit pretty hard, and Iran threatens to hit their actual infrastructure if this war escalates. So that map gives you a good sense. Let's take a look at the traffic scheme, because this is the way that Iran has asserted control over the strait. So the restricted area that they have created just off the coast of Oman there, and the inbound and outbound traffic is passing through Iranian water in between Qashm Island and Larak Island. You can see there, and then outgoing traffic is on the southern side of Larak Island as well. So they have moved the shipping corridors that were through that area into Iranian waters. And you can see it's such a small amount of space, but also this map shows the depth of the water, and you can see how quickly along the shorelines the water, it's too shallow water for major ships. And so this is a significant development, and it's very difficult to see what the circumstances would be for Iran to give up this asset, this capability that it has asserted over the strait after decades of sanctions have crippled growth in the country and forced it to be completely, essentially self-sufficient. But also the key ships that are getting the oil from Iran are Chinese vessels. So are the Americans planning on stopping Chinese vessels in the open water? So that's obviously a major escalation should it happen. It's very difficult to tell by the Americans what's bluster and what's not, because a lot of it is bluster. Let's take a look at the next map, because you can see the overlay of the strait. There's Iranian territorial waters. You can see those two green lines there are the inbound and outbound. Previously, we're looking at a map here of the strait zoomed in, with Iranian territorial waters being shown here. And Iran and Oman's territorial waters overlap, but also anywhere through that strait, you are right up against Iranian shoreline. And Trump has made a big thing about destroying the Iranian Navy, because he has no concept of what the Iranian Navy actually is. Sinking 70-year-old vessels that are tied up on the docks did not destroy Iran's Navy. Iran's Navy is a fleet of thousands of fast boats that are missile-mounted fast boats that can shut down the strait in minutes with swarms on the warships that carry anti-ship cruise and anti-ship ballistic missiles. And so that's the part of the Navy that we haven't seen. It's the part of the Navy that is underground, largely believed to be, based on Iranian television reports, believed to be embedded in the sharp mountainsides, the cliff sides along the strait. And of course, the entire Persian Gulf, the northern side of the Persian Gulf, is Iranian coastal waters and the Iranian coast. So any way of the Americans handling this, if they're going to do it with escorts, escorts are extremely cumbersome and difficult to run, and they only carry 5 or 6 ships at a time, compared to the 120 plus that normally transited through this area on any given day. And each day that the strait is like this, it's going to take more than a week to recover. And we're currently on day 48. So we're already talking about, if the war ended today, the strait opened completely, there was a full peace deal that allowed the Gulf to function as it was, you're a year away from fixing this. So, and every day it gets worse as well along that vector. So this is really a global issue, and Iran flexing this capability, using its geography, flexing its geography, is something that we're going to be watching, and people will be watching in countries all over the world, because it's going to affect everybody, everything from fertilizer to jet fuel and everything in between. Now let's take a look at what Iran has done. On the next map, you can see this is overlaid. Sal Mercogliano overlaid this map, which I think is really helpful. This is the inset that you see there is from the IRGC Navy. They released this for mariners to understand the traffic scheme, and you can see it pretty clearly there, going between Keshem and Larak Islands. And the area in the middle there was threatened to be mines. I don't think that it has been mined, but the threat is enough to stop shipping, because the main thing that is stopping shipping is insurance. Insurance companies do not want to insure these vessels under this circumstance right now. And we've seen that in the Red Sea, where they still don't sail through the Red Sea, even 2 years removed from the Ansar Allah threat in the Red Sea. Shipping has gone around Africa since then. And so these are long-term impacts. The Americans say that there's 10,000 soldiers, 100 plus fighter jets and surveillance aircraft over the strait guiding this. Not sure that's going to help much. They say there's between 12 and 15 warships. Doesn't sound like enough for any kind of serious blockade. But this U.S. blockade is obviously illegal. You can't blockade and selectively allow ships through, and that is what the U.S. is doing. Let's look at the next map here. We can see what the U.S. has done during the ceasefire, and we can know that the Iranians are doing the same thing. This is C-17 heavy cargo plane traffic, and this is a visual representation from Sky Glass that shows the routes, and we call it figuratively an air bridge of weapons from the U.S. to the Middle East. But this map shows it as a bridge, and I think that's a useful way to see it. You can see from the continental United States into bases in Europe, particularly in the UK. You can see that sharp drop in the UK, and then into the Middle East. They're restocking their weaponry that had been depleted, and Iran is doing the same thing. We could look at the next one, is also a similar view of the same thing. This is more of a global view, and this is just the C-17s from the US to the Middle East. It's not all flight, so you're just looking at cargo aircraft, the largest cargo aircraft in the world, or second largest, I guess, after the Russian one, but 520 plus individual flights. And that is the bare minimum because many don't have transponder traces for this traffic. And this is only as of earlier this week. So the US is restocking, but so is Iran. Iran uses this time to dig out missile silos that were buried. The Americans think that when they bury a missile silo that it's gone, but it's not, because there's a blast door at the end of the silo. You simply open the blast door, you dig out the launch silo, and you continue to feed those various silos through railway tracks underneath the ground, and those are completely unimpacted. So the time is used by both militaries to prepare for the next stage of the battle. If we look at number 8 here, you can see the USS Bush sailing. You can see it down at the bottom of Africa there, going around the Cape of Good Hope. There was a lot of talk about that this was happening because the Bush might be afraid to travel through the Red Sea, which is possible, although the Ford traveled through the Suez and into the Red Sea before it had its laundry fire in the Red Sea. But I think the simple explanation is that when those ships are in the Suez Canal, they're completely trapped in the canal. They could be attacked. Their GPS transponders are on. They're completely trackable. Whereas when they're going overseas, they're less so. They could also train when they're on their way over to deploy. But still gives you a sense that they're more willing to spend 3 extra days to get to the theater by traveling all the way around Africa, which is what ships are doing now that previously used to travel through the Suez and through the Red Sea. And you can see that happening already with tanker traffic. Tanker traffic is moving to the US to fill up with US crude at this point right now. So there's some belief that there's some benefit to the US to this blockade, but it's not true. It's not going to be at all true, and it's going to impact households all across the world, what we're dealing with right now and going forward. So the US blockade adds stupidity onto an already idiotic war that they have launched against Iran. Let's look at the next slide here. You can see, I wanted to show you this. These are this is also bare minimum, because we know that CENTCOM has been lying every single day of this war and hiding its casualties, hiding its physical casualties, and hiding its hardware casualties as well. But you can see this from the war zone. They put together this graphic of lost, acknowledged lost aircraft assets, dozens of Reaper drones. I think that's, again, a light number, but still they're talking about, $30 million drones times dozens lost. You could see the 4 F-15E Strike Eagles. 3 of them were shot down in Kuwait by friendly fire, and the one that was shot down by Iranian air defenses a couple weeks back. The AWACS, the Advanced Early Warning and Command Aircraft, the E3G Sentries, and that second one, it says it's damaged. We know that one is damaged. So one was completely destroyed, and at least one more damaged on the runway. And then on the right hand side, that's from the so-called rescue operation, where they lost 2 cargo planes. They were HC-130 cargo planes. They lost a pair of those. They lost 4 of their little birds, and they lost an A-10 Warthog that crash landed in Kuwait. And they also lost 2 combat search and rescue versions of Black Hawk attack helicopters. And that Chinook that you see there, I showed you on last week's show. Just wanted to keep the tally up about lost aircraft. We look on the next slide here, 9B. They also lost the Navy's MQ-4 Triton, which is a $240 million sea surveillance drone, and one of only 20 that they have. This went down on April the 9th. It crashed, its transponder disappeared over the strait, just outside of the strait in the Gulf of Oman. but another significant loss for the U.S. Let's look at the next slide, because the KC-135s were also on that. These are the strategic air refueling planes, and you can see this one pockmarked like it got hit by a shotgun, except the shotgun was a ballistic missile, presumably. And that shrapnel hitting it from when it was on the runway. This is one of 10 that were lost. And this is, we can go to the next one because you can see it again on these. These are taken by aviation photographers that are in the UK that, you know, the hobbyists that are showing these shots are by Andrew McKelvey, who is an aviation photographer, and he got these shots. These were the planes that were hit on the runway at the Prince Sultan Air Base. So you can see they had to patch it up, and these are the ones that are flying. So we can count probably how many don't arrive back that were destroyed. Again, we're going completely off CENTCOM. All the damage on U.S. bases has all been kept secret. But that will all come out there. It's impossible to keep that secret with the number of soldiers that are deployed. It's just, I don't believe that they're going to be able to hide these losses permanently, but we will follow it. So that is the situation in the Strait. Let's move to Lebanon, where we are covering Israel's invasion of South Lebanon. Again, you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer, and this is the Resistance Report, Lebanon version here. Let's take a look at the map. We have currently six Israeli military divisions participating in this war. That would match the invasion of Gaza. But as I've been saying on this show for years now, the complement of a full division is not happening in the Israeli military because of the reservists who don't report back. The numbers are not full complements. So they're not the same number of troops that were in Gaza, but it is 6 divisions, and 6 divisions fighting for 48 days in Lebanon. Have not been able to move more than a few kilometers. The main battle right now that is happening in, apparently there's a ceasefire just before we went on air, believe it when I see it. But Bint Jbeil in the south and the central there, that you can see, that is a long symbolic heart of the resistance after the Israelis were driven out of South Lebanon and literally ran away down the hill in the year 2000. And Nasrallah gave a speech in the stadium in Bint Jbeil, and he called the Israelis a spider web, and that has been stuck in the Israelis' craw for a generation. And they wanted to go back in and take Bint Jbeil. They have been unable to do that at this point. Fierce resistance, casualties on the Israeli side. Again, sketchy casualty reporting from the Israelis, but dozens are wounded a day in these battles, face-to-face battles. These battles, they take time because of operational security in order to get the videos out. So we haven't seen videos from the battle in Bint Jbeil yet, but we will as the operational security allows for it. Again, Israel's carrying out heinous massacres in Lebanon, targeting civilians. Nora talked about it. And Ruqayya Shamsuddin talked about it on our earlier report at the beginning about the massacre on Black Wednesday, when more than 300 people were killed in, according to the Israeli Air Force, a 60-second window of time. They're killing paramedics at a prodigious rate, like they did in Gaza, and not just paramedics from one particular agency being targeted, but all the different paramedics agencies, including the Red Cross, are being targeted. Last night, there was a quadruple tap massacre of 3 sets of paramedics going to another massacre. More than 90 paramedics have been killed. So even with the assistance of 5 forward bases that Israel established inside Lebanon and 6 divisions all on the ground fighting, there is no sign that the Israelis are advancing beyond even the first few kilometers from those points. And you can see where Bint Jbeil is on this map. It's near the border. There's also heavy fighting up in the top of the Galilee Panhandle, in the Hula Valley, that's where the Israelis are trying to reach the Litani River by the shortest possible distance. And then they take pictures on the Litani and say, we made it to the Litani. But you can look at this map and see how far they are from actually doing that on the eve of the ceasefire, which apparently is a 10-day ceasefire going into effect today. All right, let's take a look at the first videos. Again, there's a little bit of a delay on these videos, so we're looking at videos right now from the fourth week of the battle in late March. And again, these FPV first-person view drones where the pilot is viewing through the video and we can see what the pilot sees. And you can see this first operation here. This is in Tebe. This is in the north of just on the other side of the Galilee Panhandle. And every one of these drone shots, you can see the destruction in Lebanon, which is Israel's primary military objective. They said they want to turn South Lebanon into Beit Hanun, but look at the destruction there that you can see. We're looking, I mean, it's really remarkable views, and that's why these FPV drones are so potent. There you can see the Hummer coming up the hill. The pilot spots it, circles around here, and he's going to meet him as he comes up the road. Remember that there's an anti-tank warhead attached to these drones. I broke these drones down last week, so if you didn't catch last week's show, you should go back and get it, because go back and watch it. You can get that on the Resistance Report playlist on our YouTube channel, because the Hezbollah build is brilliant how they have done it. There you go, direct hit on a Humvee with an anti-tank missile. That is a devastating hit. We can see the next video as well. This is over on the coast we're on 14B, over on the coast north of Nakura. This operation came through on video yesterday. You can see them marking their positions here, and you can see the coast to the right. That is the western coast. We're just north of Nakura, and this is in Al-Baida. And the quadcopter here is going to seek out a tank. There you see it in the bottom right-hand corner, encircled. And as these pilots get better week in and week out, and there's another tank and a Namur troop carrier there that is identifying. Previously, we had seen them dive right down onto that target. But the development of the operations has grown significantly just in the time that we've been watching. Now we're watching that drone from a second camera, and you see how at the bottom of that drone, it's what it's carrying. It's carrying an RPG warhead. And so it's essentially carrying this RPG warhead right down onto the target. And the pilot sees through his headset how to do that. And we're watching it here from a second camera. It's going to meet this tank and drop right now out of the sky and hit this tank. You can see the tank. You can see the strike on the tank there. And then the tank is going to put up a smoke screen right here in order to try to hide its position, thinking that it's a one-off attack. But here we're going to move to the tank killer teams using anti-tank guided missile strikes. Presumably this is a Cornet strike, because we don't see the onboard camera that the Almas would have, but there you're about to see the anti-tank missile hit that tank that was attempting to cover itself. Another direct hit. So this is a complex ambush using FPV drones. This is civilian footage showing from probably from Tyre, from Sur, just up the coast. From south of there, and you can see once they get the Israeli troops moving to these targeted vehicles, now you're going to see heavy rocket fire on the position that they established. So complex operations being executed across all the fronts. This is one of the fronts, the coastal front. There's 2 Israeli divisions moving up the coast here. And this operation is in that area of operations. That's a pretty significant strike. We can go to the next one, is another FPV drone strike. This is now on the eastern battlefront, which is at the top of the Galilee Panhandle, where Israel's Kiryat Shmona is, and this is a new Israeli base that they have established for these operations in South Lebanon, again, in a civilian community, as always. using the civilians as a human shield. And of course, then any kind of damage or destruction in the town is considered targeting civilians. But we watch through these videos, and if we didn't have these videos, we wouldn't be able to prove these things. That's showing the Israeli settlement and the new position there. These drones can travel tens of kilometers. At the farthest reach, maybe 30 plus kilometers, but well within range in the 20 to 30 kilometers. And that's why we see the distance traveled. And I left these videos for the whole flight that they showed, so you can see them moving across the terrain. It gives you a really good idea of what the battle space is like, how challenging it is, an area to fight in. Here, the drone is coming down on the base. You can see their cars. You can see the Humvee. And if you look to the left, you're going to see a soldier just off to the side there. There you see him off to the side of this Humvee that gets hit with an anti-tank missile, which would destroy that Humvee. Unclear about that soldier. So that's another significant operation. Let's look at 16. Let's look at 16. This is going to be a pair of anti-tank guided missile strikes. That was just going to repeat in that previous video, but I think we got a good view of it. There you can see the soldiers using houses, again, occupying houses as soon as they come across the border. There's the anti-tank missile. You can watch it drop out of the sky and hit directly on that Israeli troop position. This is southwest of Bint Jbeil. The Israelis are trying to move up towards and surround Bint Jbeil, but they're in a fierce battle with the resistance in Bint Jbeil to prevent that, although that is not the resistance strategy. There's going to be a second anti-tank strike here. The video that we're watching smoke billowing from the first target, and you're going to see movement of troops for the evacuation of the wounded. Here, the Israelis have claimed hundreds of wounded, but their casualty counts are as sketchy as always, and you're going to see a second strike here on that same position. So complex, coordinated strikes all across the battle space, from the furthest western point to the furthest eastern point in Lebanon, in South Lebanon. And Hezbollah is able to carry out these operations. They use the red circle in the way that Qassam used the red triangle. So let's look at the next one. We've got drone strikes on Israeli troop positions, and this is how you reach them. The Israelis are being reached by these drones, both the FPV quadcopters that we're calling drones, but these drones are the fixed wing drones, the Sayed 107s that they fire. And they don't make as much noise. They have an electric propeller. Here we're watching the fighters entering the location, the targeting data. And again, it's GPS targeting data. You can basically put what window you want to put the drone into, and it can hit. We're going to see here their compressed air launchers, which is also smart because it leaves a lighter heat signature from the launches. So these fighters we're looking at these fighters completely shrouded in the foliage, in the bush in Lebanon here, completely concealing the launch, and then aiming them at their targets that are miles away. And that's the asset of these drones that are built in Lebanon, built by Hezbollah. Of course, sharing Iranian technology and insight, but built by Hezbollah. And you can see that they even made the drones camouflage. So when you're mounting the drones, they hide within the trees. And there you see the strike there on an Israeli position. Again, you can see the evacuation of apparently wounded troops, which we're hearing about dozens a day. But we haven't gotten full tallies in the same way that they hid those casualties during the war in Gaza. Let's take a look at number 18 here. This is a stitch I made of a bunch of drone ops here targeting an IDF barracks. You can see they put it on a map handy for us so we can see where they're targeting. And again, look at just those two small rails. It's easy to move, easy to put into place. You can see the camouflage there. They plug in the coordinates for the strike and they launch with the air compressor. And these are actually pretty safe operations to execute for the fighters. And it has made the drones a significant part of this stage of the battle. And again, to repeat, we are a week behind or so in getting the battle videos. So these operations are taking place when the Israelis are at a distance that they're not reachable through the other weapons. They're being hit with these drone strikes. And as this is going on, I'll talk a little bit more about this towards the end, but rocket attacks are happening constantly during these operations. This is a stitch of 3 separate operations that targeted 3 IDF bases and barracks in the north. And you can see those operations are very difficult to find the launch site of. Hezbollah carried out more than 230 drone operations of this style in the first month of the battle. So, you're seeing dozens of these a day. And they will continue because they will fire these drones on the rear guard of the Israelis, which they do. They're constantly firing rockets and drones at the back positions of Israeli troops that are mustering to come into Lebanon. So it's really a multifaceted resistance that's happening all across the territory and all across the types of weapons and units within Hezbollah. Here you can see a night launch. And again, that's the air compressor. I've shown you guys lots of drone launches at night where you see the long red tail of the rocket boost. But the air compressor just leaves that little bit of friction that you see. It's not a flame so much as it is the friction of the launch from the metal railings. So these are all Hezbollah built, and they have presumably as many of them as they need for this battle, because we didn't see them used that much in the first major battle in 23 and 24. Although there were a couple of very high-profile operations, including putting 2 of these Sayed 107s into the Golani Brigade base while they were all mustering to go to Lebanon, that killed and wounded something like 60 Israeli soldiers in that single attack. So there's the Sayed 107 going out. And if we look at the next slide, I just gave you a little freeze frame so that you could see what it looks like on its exit. And then now let's watch in the next one, watch it arriving in Israel. And there it is on the Israeli side, shown by civilians camera. This is going to be shot out of the air by an Apache attack helicopter. The helicopters chase them all around. And we don't see a ton of these getting shot out of the air. They would for sure want everyone that they do to be shown. And I think that they're pretty rare. We saw them in those previous videos. They have a very small heat signature. They're battery powered. Some of them have wooden propellers. Their radar cross section is very minimal and it's very difficult to see them. We saw in the first battle in 2024 that Israel had people literally eyeballing them. On the other side of the border. Their job was to literally watch to see them flying and then radio them in. And that was, again, for Israel. That was civilians doing that work for Israel that we watched. I showed you guys a 60 minutes clip of that, the way that the civilians were integrated into the military to do this kind of observation of these drones, because they're very difficult to find with the traditional military radars. Let's take a look at this pretty remarkable operation, number 21 we're on now. This is a Ghadr anti-ship cruise missile that was launched 2 weeks back, launched at the sea. And it's a pretty significant weapon that you'll see here.
يا صاحب الزمان.
Maybe we can loop that one more time without audio, and I can just point out a couple of things in this. So this is a pretty significant missile. This is the first time we saw this in this battle. This is an Iranian anti-ship cruise missile. There you see Imad Mughniya, who is the founder, the builder, the architect of the Islamic resistance, the military wing, who was assassinated in Syria back in 2008, I believe. But his forces, Hajj Radwan is his nickname, and the Radwan forces are named after him, the shock troops, the most elite fighters in Hezbollah who are fighting right now in the south. So they're saluting to Mughniya. They also dedicate this to Nasrallah. There you can see Khamenei and Nasrallah, Ali Khamenei, and then his son, along with Naim Qassem. And they saluted them with the launch of that missile. So a pretty significant operation. Hezbollah said in their field report that they were tracking an Israeli warship off the coast that was carrying out offensive operations. There was some talk at the time that it may have been a British ship that was targeted, but according to the field report, they had been tracking that vessel for hours before launching this attack. And you can see the way here that their canister launched. And Hezbollah has a number of these, and it's the reason why ships are not off the coast. And it's the reason why the aircraft carriers that were coming ostensibly to defend Israel had to stay so far off the Israeli coast that they actually weren't much use in the missile defense array, because their radars were set back too far because of missiles like this. You can see the size of it there. And these are capabilities that Hezbollah has. And the writing on, this next, let's go to the next one there. You see it launch. It's a sea skipping missile. So it flies just above the sea, and it flies below radar, most radar. And here you see them launching a Pava cruise missile. This is an Iranian cruise missile, and written on it says, "We will never accept humiliation, and our banner will never fall." We're watching it here be launched from its rail launch. And we saw these, I broke these down during True Promise 1 and True Promise 2. The Iranians used these cruise missiles in staggered attacks with ballistic missiles and with drones. The cruise missiles are faster than drones, slower than ballistic missiles, and so they make a layered attack that we haven't seen in this round so much, but we definitely saw it in the demonstration battles of True Promise 1 and True Promise 2. So this was an operation targeting Israeli troops in the Galilee Panhandle, and again, we're still in late March with these videos. We're getting them about a week to 10 days later, again, because it's very difficult to get these footages through South Lebanon. But still, every single day, on the minute of the operations, there is clearly command and control, because the field reports are filed within minutes of the operations. The field reports go all 24 hours around the clock. And many days we're seeing 80, more than 70, up to 95 operations in a day. So a remarkable tempo of operations still by Hezbollah. Let's take a look at 23. These are Fatah class. That's Haifa there they're showing you, and an Israeli position south of Haifa targeting the industrial base. These are Fatah. They're either Fatah 110s or Fatah 360s. We didn't know that Hezbollah had Fatah 360s, which are smaller versions of Fatah 110s. But we have seemingly seen these launched several times during the war that are, by appearance, Fatah 360s. They're shorter range. But the Fatah 110s we have seen launched, and the Fatah 110s are what Iran has been using to batter the Gulf. So you can see the launch of it there, precision guided, heavy warhead, really accurate missiles that Hezbollah is using here against an Israeli base that is west of Hadera. And you can see a good shot of that missile there. So these are heavy and precise missiles. And we've been seeing apparently no shortage of these either. Hezbollah has promised to fight an existential battle. Naim Qassem, the Secretary General, spoke the other day and said that they're willing to fight till their last breath, and that their banner will never fall. And so they're treating this as an existential battle, which I think is an appropriate way to look at the fight when Israel's promising to turn South Lebanon into Beit Hanun, which was the sort of, the centerpiece of the genocide. So yeah, this does seem to be an existential fight for Hezbollah, and they have been fighting this battle very significantly, because we can remember we heard that Hezbollah was defeated. Israel said that because they blew up some pagers and assassinated some senior generals and of course Nasrallah, that Hezbollah was defeated. But we know, watching this program, that we tracked the ground battle in South Lebanon right up to the point of the ceasefire, and Hezbollah was not defeated. They repelled the ground invasion at that time, and they're doing it again this time in even more significant ways, using even more of their fighters. Let's look at 24, because one of the things that Israel, so this is actually, sorry, I was one ahead of myself. This is correct, 24. You're going to watch Phallic 1 heavy rockets be here, the 60-kilo warhead. And again, we're seeing that Hezbollah military media is giving cameras to the fighters in a way that we never saw before. So we see the setup of these operations, what goes into them, how many men it takes, qualified fighters to execute these operations. And this is a pickup mounted phallic rocket launcher. So you're seeing a pickup truck that the fighters say have no brakes. They're talking to each other as they're driving, and he's saying, "I don't want to be filmed." He says, "Don't film me, delete it." And the other guy says to him, "What message do you send?" And he says, "The resistance is just fine." And we remember back in 2024, Hezbollah released a video when Israel said that they had destroyed all of Hezbollah's drones. Hezbollah released a video showing a bunker full of like thousands of drones that said, "Our drones are just fine." So that's what the fighter says here. And when they park here, they say the truck has no brakes, so they got to put a stone behind it. There you see the fighter putting the stone behind it. I guess the parking brake's blown on this one, but you see them raise the launcher, and you can see the fighters here. Oftentimes we've been seeing the fighters that are doing these manning the launch controllers have fingers missing from the pager operations. I think you'll see that in the next video. We've seen it in a few other videos as well, and Hezbollah has wanted to show those because Israel thought that was the end of the war if you blew some hands off some fighters and killed a bunch of children with the pagers, that Hezbollah would somehow collapse. Let's look at the next one, 25. This is another one of these remarkable Fadi launchers here. We're seeing in the underground, the preparation for it. Israel said that they have destroyed 200 launchers, and guaranteed they've counted this Fadi launcher multiple times, because when you see it, it's in pretty rough shape, but they still are able to use it. And so just puts further lie to Israel's statistics of, I mean, I don't know where they get these numbers anyway, but they've been bragging about number of barrels. So if a multiple launch rocket system has 16 barrels, they're saying we took out 16 rocket launchers, which is just not a very accurate way of describing your hits. And even still, when hit, these launchers, multiple launchers here, you can see the Fadi launcher here. Watch when the truck comes around the corner, and you'll see that it's been hit multiple times. The fighters say, they quote from the Quran a couple times, permission to fight has been given to those who are being fought. This is a defensive war for Hezbollah. We see them in the trucks. We've never seen this before in their videos. They were so tight about this kind of stuff. But in this round, they've shown us this video, and it's just given us a remarkable edge into understanding what goes into all these operations, the professionalism of these different units that are normally, we only see the rockets being launched. We don't see the crew behind it, but you can see the way that they camouflage their trucks. They conceal the launchers using the trees there. We'll get a shot before there's the fighters giving the victory sign as we see their personalities. All of this stuff is just, that's what happened. There's a fighter who had his fingers blown off, showing you them. He wants you to see them as he carries out these operations. And this is another Fadi launcher. The Fadi is a heavy warhead rocket. It has precision guided capabilities that had been added onto them by Hezbollah. And these play a significant part in attacking Israel's industrial base, but also its troops behind the back line, where they're trying to muster to enter South Lebanon. So this has been the Resistance Report for day 923 of Israel's genocide and day 45 of Hezbollah's defense of South Lebanon.
Once again, thank you so much, Jon. Those maps. First the maps of the Strait of Hormuz, and the Trump administration's insistence that they're going to blockade the blockade. Meanwhile, as you said, the global markets for everything from petroleum to helium to the basic resources and ingredients that make up the global economy. It's
and the ships are all in the wrong spots. They're empty or full in the wrong spots. It takes weeks for them. They were talking about the last shipment of jet fuel to make it to Europe just arrived, and it left before the war started. So you're talking 6-week transit times. That's just to Europe. So you can imagine the further distances that have to be traveled. This is a real disaster that hasn't set in yet, but is coming.
I think that's a key point, Jon, is it's already baked in, as they say. And it hasn't hit most people. It's hitting in some countries. There's already rationing of energy products in some countries, but I think it's going to hit more broadly very soon. Even if the situation changes, even as you said, if the war was to stop today, there's still worse to come for a lot of people. But it's not likely to stop. It's at least the lack of traffic through the strait is not going to change, even if the full-scale war does not resume in the next few days.
And that's why it's a strange strategy for Trump to be doing this ceasefire strategy, because it's just extending the war. Because the main impact of the war for the U.S. is through the strait. And so it's not doing anything to improve the situation in the strait. It's obviously making it worse, which is why it's, you want to call it a joke, but it's obviously deeply impacting all over the world. The IMF statement about a global recession was a very dire warning, a dire warning. And the people that will suffer the most are the Gulf countries that are supposed to be U.S. allies, and the country that will, according to the IMF, that will suffer the most of the industrialized countries is the U.K., which is using its bases as a launch pad for the Americans. For this war. They're the ones who will suffer the most, the highest gas prices. I think that's where they started with. But of course, gas prices mean everything, because our entire economies are out on, gas using vessels, whether it's trucks or ships out at sea. So this
airplanes.
I think the logic, you said can't remember the exact word you used. Is it makes no sense, or it's bizarre. I think the logic is the unchanged logic that punishing Iran will force it to surrender. And so Trump's logic is that if we block Iranian ports, if we stop Iran from exporting its oil, that Iran will suffer so much pain that it will give in. But that has been the strategy of maximum pressure sanctions for decades, of depriving Iran of everything. And it hasn't worked. It has led to this point where Iran is more determined than ever to defend its sovereignty. And yes, of course, if Iran could not export its oil for, forever, then it would suffer. It would be a serious problem for Iran. But if Iran is stopped from exporting its oil for weeks or months or 6 months, maybe even a year, Iran, I don't know exactly, but I'm sure that they have planned for that, and they're going to be able to withstand that. And they probably have other routes over the Caspian Sea from Russia. They're going to find ways, because the blockade does not include the Caspian Sea, which the U.S. has no access to. But my point is that Iran can withstand this far longer than the world economy can. And so that's why it is so counterproductive. But you have to think of it in the terms that Trump is trapped, as we've been saying, not only us, but we've been saying for weeks, because the price of getting out of this war is admitting a strategic defeat, or if not openly admitting it, agreeing to terms which acknowledge that. And you can't just keep going back and telling Iran, give us what we couldn't take from you by force. Why would Iran give that up, especially when this is existential for Iran? So now, there was a 2-week ceasefire, which expires in a few days. Today, they announced the 10-day ceasefire for Lebanon. That it wouldn't, if the point of that 10-day ceasefire is to allow the US and Iran to find the possibility of some terms, it would make no sense for the US-Iran ceasefire to expire on Monday and to continue the ceasefire in Lebanon. So if I were to guess, I would assume that, unless this is all a subterfuge by the United States, which of course it could be, but that aside, I would assume that they would have to extend the US-Iran ceasefire to run at least as long as the ceasefire in Lebanon. And then what can be achieved in that time? Who knows? The gaps are enormous. Unless the US is willing to recognize Iran's sovereignty and independence and right to self-defense, I don't see how they're going to close those gaps. And then when it comes to Lebanon, the US and Israel are attempting to treat that as if it's a separate track, as if the ceasefire is because the collaborationist Lebanese government, the pro-Israel Lebanese government, because of their meetings with Israeli leaders, they're trying to spin it as if the ceasefire is a result of that, when in fact the ceasefire is entirely the result of the resistance and Iran's insistence on it. So but what the US is saying now is that, and what Trump said when he announced the ceasefire on the Lebanon front today is that this is in order to achieve peace between Israel and Lebanon. And how can you achieve peace between Israel and Lebanon in 10 days? You can't. How can you achieve peace between Israel and Lebanon when Israel continues to occupy Lebanon, bomb Lebanon? Even with a ceasefire, the Israeli troops are presumably not withdrawing from Lebanon. So it's a situation where it's very clear that everyone wants a way out. I don't think Iran wants war, but there may be no way out, and so we may be on the edge of even further escalation. That's all. That's how it looks, unless miracles happen.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. Iran is resilient because of the sanctions regime. They are the most resilient, probably the most resilient country in the world to handle this situation right now. We heard from China this week that said that their vessels are going in to get the oil that they have contracts with for Iran. So this is the blockade could escalate into something far beyond this localized matter if the U.S. is attempting to pull over Chinese ships. So it's just once again, it just seems like they haven't thought through the most basic elements of this, and that they don't have around them, they being the U.S., advisors of any kind of political or regional expertise, because this is the first thing that any of those advisors would have told them. I mean, the second thing the advisors would have told them is that you can't get a negotiation in 21 hours. It takes 21 hours a day, day after day after day, and they just can't send two real estate guys and the vice president who gets tired, doesn't understand anything that they're talking about. Iran showed up to the negotiations with 70 experts on each file, and it's just,
each probably with 3 PhDs.
Absolutely.
yeah, and
Right.
know every
Speaking
detail
5
of the-
languages. Yeah.
It's just it's embarrassing. It's an
It is
embarrassing.
What you would have done if what the United States would have done if it was serious about negotiation rather than just optics and getting Iran to capitulate, is they would have come out of the Islamabad talks with what the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi referred to, which is a memorandum of understanding. In other words, an agenda for the next set of talks.
Exactly.
And that's what Trump agreed to when he agreed to the Iranian 10 points, which we discussed with Sara Larijani and Taha Zeinali, the 10 points which he agreed to as a basis for negotiations. He didn't accept them all. That's fine. You don't go into a negotiation accepting everything your opponent demands, but you go in saying this is a basis. And they would have stuck to that. But, people, there is, I think, John, what you hit on something important, because yes, the US does have a grand strategy, which is to control the world and to exploit its resources. But the people who are in charge now are not, they don't have some secret magic strategy. I really do think they are improvising, because their plan was to win in 3 days or 4 days. And they had no backup. They had no plan B. So that they're swinging from one thing to the next. Yeah. And as the saying goes, the only thing you can count on is look at what they do, not what they say. And what they're doing now, as you pointed out, is rearming, reloading that air bridge of weapons. They're moving more troops into place. And as we know historically, when they do that, they tend to use those weapons. So it's hard to see this as anything other than a lull, but it's possible that the stakes will concentrate minds and find a way out. But either way, I mean, one thing I'm thinking about a lot, we didn't discuss it, is that in the long term, where does this leave Israel?
Yeah.
Because I think no matter what, the effects don't necessarily show up immediately, but it's hard to see Israel recovering from this long term. I think we've talked about this on previous shows about the long-term economic damage, the brain drain, and so on, and we can only see that accelerating. Who is going to put billion-dollar chip plants in Israel now when you can't even bring a container ship to Eilat, or maybe even the Mediterranean ports, and when aviation is shut down? And think of Israel's reputation in the world, already not great, but when a global an unprecedented global energy crisis, perhaps agricultural crisis, famine, economic dislocation on a massive scale, can be laid directly at the feet of Israel and, of course, the United States. But they seem to be just on a suicidal path. They want to take everyone else with them, but that's the way they're going.
I mean, look at Israel's economy. We've talked about that a lot, but I believe their new budget needs to be passed shortly, and they're looking at a huge deficit and an irrevocable amount of debt to the amount that they're spending on these wars, these genocides, these programs of ethnic cleansing. They're having a really hard time, and Jon, you know more about this, maintaining their reserve army. People are just not showing up. As you said, the brain drain is absolutely real. Everything is plummeting. No one's investing in Israel anymore. Their credit rating has plummeted. And as we always say, the revulsion worldwide to Israel and the United States as partners in these crimes, of course, but Israel as the face of Western imperial violence. You can't put that back in the box. So yeah, I mean, I would love to in the next few weeks get someone who we've had on before to talk about the future of the so-called state of Israel, what defeat looks like, what it could look like, what the economic situation is. A lot of it is being obscured and hidden by the Israeli government, of course. But what we know is unfolding now because of Israel's suicidal policies, and what that could mean if the global shipping economy, especially, continues down the path that it's that is happening right now in the Gulf.
And yet, for all that, Nora, the Israeli Jewish public's enthusiasm for war and genocide is completely undimmed. I'm looking at,
it's more than 90% in a recent poll.
Yeah, I'm looking at this poll. I'll drop this in the chat. I'm looking at this poll from the Israel Democracy Institute, and
hilarious.
They had sirens all day long for 40 days. They were in the shelters, and we don't know the full extent of the damage that was done to Israel because of the censorship, but by any account, it was extensive. And only 14% of Israeli Jews felt very relieved by the ceasefire with Iran. And what is it? Almost 40% were somewhat unhappy or very unhappy. And then the biggest group, something like a third, were neither happy nor relieved. I mean, how are you only a minority of Israeli Jews were happy that there was a ceasefire. They wanted
they're
to keep
enraged that there's a ceasefire in Lebanon. I already saw that just the minute old, and they're already
No, they want more war, more destruction. And, I mean, people talk about the Samson option, of course, destroying the world if Israel is, loses, kind of thing. But that's culturally and societally what they believe too. It is a completely indoctrinated and propagandized society and culture that only believes in the continued theft, continued control, continued genocide, and expulsion of indigenous people from Palestine to Iran. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Nora.
I was just going to rant more about how disgusting. Israeli society
go
has
ahead, but
No.
something you said reminded me that we've certainly talked about this also in the past, that because Israel cannot I mean, you would say, well, the support for all this killing and genocide doesn't make it doesn't make rational sense, even because Israelis are suffering too, and it doesn't seem to get them anywhere. But we've certainly talked in the past about how, because Israel cannot achieve any strategic victory through military means. It cannot make the Palestinians disappear.
Yeah.
It cannot force Lebanon to submit. It cannot destroy Iran. That killing becomes an end in itself. They define victory as killing. They define victory as how many people you can kill, how many schools and hospitals can you destroy, how many apartment buildings can you drop. And you see that because they openly celebrate it. They celebrate these things as if they are victories, when of course they are horrific crimes, but they don't get you to any kind of strategic goal. Israel is really, they talk about this thing called the 80-year curse, and Netanyahu a few years ago famously said, oh, Israel will make it to 80 years, but you don't know. This does not look like a project that can be sustainable, not on this level of killing and violence. I mean, I have to say I've been depressingly surprised with how much killing they can do and how much the so-called international community will tolerate. But there has to be a limit, and we have to be getting closer.
We certainly have not seen that limit, because the international community has not done anything to stop, not even the most bare minimum.
No.
Yeah,
so,
of course not.
And it's scary about Israel because of the way that their army is set up, that the number of people that have participated in this genocide, it really is now a genocidal society. That's
fully permeated. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know what else there is to say.
We don't know what the world will look like. We won't be here next week, as we said, for the show, but we will be back in 2 weeks. And what the world will look like in 2 weeks' time is anyone's guess.
Yeah. But our coverage, of course, will continue on our website, electronicintifada.net. And we are also going to be probably putting up a few standalone interviews on the Electronic Intifada podcast, of course, on YouTube, and all the ways that you can listen to our interviews, of course. And with that, Ali, let's take a look at the website. We've published some extraordinary features and reports. There's Tamara's report that she just published. I was honored to highlight it on the news report earlier. Israel's largest land grab since the Nakba, talking about all of these ways that they don't even they don't have to hide it anymore or try and use obfuscating language. They just pass these laws in their kangaroo, courts, and allow themselves, gift themselves the ability to steal more land that isn't theirs. And so that is an extraordinary read. Thank you, Tamara, for distilling all of these recent measures into a really comprehensive report, as always.
And as I mentioned last week, just been published last week, the Month in Pictures feature put together by a colleague, Maureen Murphy, with all of those incredible photos from photographers working across Palestine and around the region, but also with an incredible summary of all of the of everything that's happening across Palestine in the past month. And then we have more recent articles we've just published in the last day or two. We have a piece from Hud Nassar about the situation of women in Gaza, describing what they went through during this genocide and occupation. And of course, new waves of Palestinian refugees forced out of their land by the genocide, many into Egypt, and Ruwaida Ahmed reporting on Palestinians from Gaza in Egypt now, and some of the ways they are trying to make a living and to find community and to find sustenance in Egypt while they're there. So a lot to absorb from this really fantastic reporting.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, we couldn't do any of this reporting. We couldn't pay our contributors. We couldn't make this all possible and available for free to our readers and listeners and viewers if it weren't for the contributions of our supporters. Ali, who do we have to thank this week in particular?
We have so many people to thank, and let me just find my little list. And I'm just going to name a few of them. William, Honor, Andrew, Jim, Ben, Doug, Mark, Abbas, James, Yolande, and Eileen. You are among many people around the world who make this work possible, who allow us to continue to support our colleagues in Gaza, the writers, the photographers, to do all the work we do, the meticulous editing and fact-checking that keep our standards as high as they are, as exemplary as they are. That's something we're very proud of. Everything you see on this live stream, our podcast, it's all thanks to you, and thanks to you we can share this information with the world. So you don't have to watch CNN and NBC and the BBC. You can get real news here. You can get it. You can get analysis from Jon Elmer that you cannot get anywhere else in the world, and we're very proud of that work and all the work that we do. And we're very grateful to all of you for making it possible. So you go to electronicintifada.net. Hey, I know it was just tax day in the United States, so it's tough for many people right now. April is a hard month, but some of you got refunds. So if you want to
offset the taxes that go to the military.
Yeah. So you can recycle your refund to the Electronic Intifada. Go to electronicintifada.net, click donate now. There are links in the description below. Of course, only give if you can afford it. It's a gift you give to the world to share this information. And and you can become a monthly supporter if you want. That really helps us, or just give a gift anytime you want to. It is highly appreciated. And to everyone else, keep sharing, liking, reading, listening. Help us globalize the Electronic Intifada.
There we go. Well, thank you, Ali. Commercial free all the time.
Always. And we don't make, these videos on YouTube, our channel is not monetized.
No.
So we don't make money from being on YouTube. They make money from us, because if you see ads, we don't get a penny from those. We don't run ads. We don't monetize the channel. We are strictly based on, we don't have some of the same sensational headlines as, some channels you see, because we're not trying to just maximize the number of clicks and get ad revenue. We are trying to bring you the most serious, credible, well-researched news and analysis that we can, and we can only do it thanks to you.
Well said. No clicks maxing on this channel. And I want to, of course, thank our excellent producer and director, Tamara Nassar. Thank you, Tamara, for everything that you do every week, every day. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you to Eli Gerzon for social media production. Thanks to Pierre Loisel for radio production. Thanks to all of our colleagues at the Electronic Intifada who keep this incredible publication running. And of course, to our contributors. And on behalf of myself and Ali, John, and Tamara, thank you all. And we will see you in 2 weeks.